There's this concept called commitment engineering. It's not something I invented. Some really smart people I used to work with said this all the time, but I'm becoming an evangelist for it now, which is, I think really early on, founders will often try to be like, okay, I've got my startup idea and I've got my product prototype and I'm going to go try to sell it now. And I'm going to convince people of this thing. I think early on, the most important thing to do is be the person who really understands the problem and try to find the people who feel that problem really acutely. And then you get into what I call this commitment engineering loop, which is the first thing you're asking for is not, will you buy my software? With these first people, the first thing you're asking for is like, hey, it sounds like you have this pain point. Would you take a half hour and do a call and just tell me about it? And if they say yes, then great, you've started something. If they say no, you're like, it's clearly not a big enough pain point for them to take a half hour and talk to you. That tells you something. It's like early signal, even before you have a single line of code written. And then once you do have some code written, it's, hey, will you take a half hour and click around in a prototype with me? And then you're testing that. Are they willing to give their time? Are they willing to make a commitment to you that's non-monetary, but they're giving you something because you're giving them something, right? Like it's a give-get loop. And you can ride that all the way through. You can be like, hey, great. If I came back with another version of this in 3 weeks that addressed feedback XYZ, would you do a 45-minute session and would you invite your boss or a colleague, or would you use this for real for a day? And you're just testing the whole way up, all the way up through you sign this contract. You can validate your way up. And I think getting into those loops early and getting those feedback loops and just finding a way to validate, am I on the right track, is so important versus what you do see some founders do. And it's a very common mistake, which is spend 6 months like just building in a hole. And then you get out there and you start validating by trying to sell it. And if you got some foundational assumptions wrong, like you don't want to find that out that far in. And I've had so many moments in my career, even at Hex, where that age-old wisdom of like, you're the easiest one to fool comes in. Of you can convince yourself of almost anything. And real intellectual honesty, even if it's painful in the moment when you hear that the thing you've just spent a bunch of time on is not it, like, it's important. It's hard though. It's really hard.